Welcome to Medical Sells You. Today, I'm your host, Dave Sterrett. We're talking about the subject, pharmaceutical versus medical device sales. Which one is right for you? Because people join our program and they're curious. They're like, you know what? I kind of want to break into medical sales, but I just don't think I can be in the OR. Or people are like, you know what? I hear that pharma, you're just kind of picking up samples, you're dropping them off. That seems so boring to me. I'd rather be in the OR where there's excitement. And so there's these stereotypical ideas that people have. And one of the things about Medical Sells You is that we bring in people across the board who have different specialties. Because even within medical device or pharmaceutical, there's all different types of opportunities. And right now, there's never been a better time to jump into this high-paying, innovative industry. But choosing which path to walk is critical. The two most common trajectories are pharma or medical device, but there's also cancer testing. I got into a company called Foundation Medicine, where we were doing screening for cancer. It was also known as precision medicine, because anytime an oncologist was giving an FDA-approved treatment, they needed an accurate test, right, to test these biomarkers. So all these opportunities, they have their unique rewards, challenges, lifestyles, and I'm going to share with you 12 key distinctions in realistic starting goals and compensations and trade-offs and long-term prospects so that you can choose wisely. And if you're having struggles breaking into this industry and you're not getting the offers, we can help you. That's what we're doing every single day. Every single week, we have people breaking in through our program at Medical Sells You. Number one, are you more interested in science or engineering? So if you love biology, pharma is rooted in scientific discovery. The molecules, the clinical trials, the mechanism of action, biomarkers, regulatory endpoints, therapeutic pathways, having a sophisticated conversation within oncologists over which treatment is best for that cancer patient. If that interests you, you may want to go into pharma. In device, if you love the idea of being in the operating room, if you're interested in the engineering, the materials, the usability, devices evolve rapidly through these design tweaks. If you're willing to have that grit and really just kind of show up and be right there during the surgery, maybe going into device is better for you. Maybe you're like, I'm not sure about either one, but I'm so interested in diagnostics and genomics. So diagnostics and genomics is a hybrid. You're selling the test, the diagnostics, the biomarker analysis. So if you love molecular pathways, if you're passionate, maybe someone that you loved was impacted by cancer, you may want to go into cancer screening. That's why our program at Medical Sells You, we help people across the board. But we probably have had we've had the most people get into oncology, both in pharma, but also all these companies in genetic testing, cancer screening, because a lot of people have a story. They were moved. Maybe someone they love had breast cancer, had prostate cancer, and they want to get into oncology. So if you want to be there in the operating room, maybe you want that more hands-on. If you're interested in problem solving, you have kind of an engineering mind, maybe device would be better for you in the operating room. If you love biology and you want to have those sophisticated conversations with doctors, maybe pharma is better for you. So let's talk about pay. This is what a lot of people want to talk about. Entry roles. Okay, so in pharma, you typically begin your career by calling on primary care. In other words, you're not necessarily in specialists, but you're family doctors, your internal medicine physicians, your primary care. These are physicians that if you go on your yearly checkup, you will see these physicians. And they may be medications like cardiovascular drugs. Now, eventually, you may want to get into specialty. But a lot of times, these are drugs with like respiratory or diabetes. And your base salaries for these first year have ranged anywhere from, in our program, okay, at Medical Sales U, just the base starting out is anywhere from $95,000 to $135,000. That's the reasonable estimate. And so now on top of that, there's the bonus incentive. So one might have a bonus of anywhere from $10,000 to $80,000. We just had someone who just broke in, Kanika. She just joined the podcast. She just mentioned she had a $120K base and $80,000 commission. So she came in at $200,000, even though she moved from another country. In her first year in Texas, she lands an incredible job. So in device entry roles for most people, the path for most people is that associate role or clinical sales assistant. So your base is going to be low. It's going to be more like 70K to 95K, maybe 115 at the high end. The bonus will be smaller. Now, the goal here is to learn. You're to support the full line rep. Okay, you have to be there. There may be tougher hours here, but you will see this as a stepping stone. Okay, in diagnostics and genomics, these roles will often pay anywhere, base salaries 80 to 115, maybe 120 starting out. If you become, and there's not a lot of associate roles in that, but the compensation, the trajectory differs in these. So for example, in pharma, you want to start out calling on primary care, but then you get into specialty. And if you get into specialty, say like in oncology, then your base moves up to like 145K to like 225K. Your OTE, your on-target earnings, are typically anywhere from 200 to 325 for high performers. Those are the top, best of the best oncology pharmaceutical reps that are making like 325. That's not all pharma reps. But here's why I think that's intriguing for a lot of people is because oncology is where there's the most innovation as far as the most FDA approvals. I don't know about you. I don't know if anybody has ever, like if you've ran like a 5K or maybe like a half marathon for cancer. Well, there's a lot of money being pumped into these new, chemo-free options for cancer. So your compensation, your pay is relatively predictable. There's less extreme like swings because you have that high base. Now in device, your base salary will be lower, maybe like 90 to 120K. But it's really aggressive, uncapped commission structures. You're truly selling. Okay, so this is why in device, I had dinner with a guy who was making $750,000 at one of your big, large device companies. Your top performers will earn like 300K to 500. Now that's rare. There's a lot of people who come to us, burn out in device, making like 150. And they're like, I'm tired of this. Or maybe they're making 180. And they're like, I want to get into oncology. And they join our program. So, but if you stay with the territory in some divisions, not all, you can get paid really well in device. So diagnostics, again, typically you'll start out selling in primary care with screening. And your base there may be like 115, maybe making like 180. But if you get into oncology, now your base is like 140 and you're making like 240. Okay. My first year in oncology diagnostics, I made over $200,000. So that's just gives you a little bit of an overview. Let's move on to the next topic. Let's talk about the sales process, the influence, the transaction. So pharma is primarily the influencers play. Like you are going to sell to the physician. Most of the time, the oncologist, if you're in specialty, is the one making the decision. However, it's very important that you win over other people, right? Hospital administrators, you want to win over the pharmacists, nurse practitioners. You want to really build trust with the nurses. We teach this in Medical Sales U. But it's ultimately the doctor who makes the decision. In device, you have to win the trust of that surgeon, but you have to win over administrators as well. And depending on what devices you're selling, it's often administrators who will make decisions as well. So it's kind of a hybrid. You have to manage trials, demos, pricing, contract negotiations. Okay. So again, in Medical Sales U, we are going to help you make the right decision. What is best for you? And you may be in a situation like I was. I was doing diagnostics for cancer, living in Dallas, Texas. I was in a long distance relationship. I wanted to leave Dallas, Texas and move to Columbus, Ohio. And guess what? I was interviewing with Stryker Endoscopy. I was interviewing with Arthrex. I was interviewing with Amgen in the Oncology Pharma. And I was in multiple rounds with these companies. And guess what? Sanofi interviewed me, even though I didn't have pharma experience. This is back in 2021. And they moved quickly. They gave me a base of 165. I made about 240 at Sanofi. Great benefits, right? Matching 401k, all this. This was my first job in pharma, and it was in specialty. It was in oncology. I was able to take that position because I did have some sales experience, even though it wasn't pharma. It was in the diagnostic space. But here's the thing about our program is some of our students, we tell to really specialize to go after, these 7 opportunities. But for others, they want to throw the net kind of broad. They're like, you know what? I'm open to either one. And that's a good space to be in too, because you can leverage multiple offers. So if you want to be in the operating room, if you want to be right there where the surgery is taking place, you may want to be in device. Now, if you're in pharma, you're like, well, what do I do? Well, you will often stop by, often schedule these meetings, do a lot of scheduled sessions, these lunch and learns. You'll do conferences. You'll have displays. You'll do dinner programs. In pharma, you will often do Zoom calls. You'll stop by. You'll do educational meetings with the pharmacists. You'll collaborate with a lot of people. But device reps often work in the actual operating room. You'll assist in cases. You'll support the surgical teams. Some have to be on the call. We've had people go into trauma. But most jobs, you don't have to be on call. Most surgeries are scheduled in advance. You know a little bit ahead of time. So that brings us to this discussion about work-life balance and your schedule flexibility. And I think, one of the things about pharma is, for me in this season of life, I chose it. Why? Because I have a young family. It's more like an 8 to 5. Weekend work, there's a lot of flexibility. Rarely do I have weekend work. Every now and then there's a conference. Device reps often start earlier. There's early starts. Sometimes there's late inventory checks. At first, you will have to pay your dues in device. However, again, look at that as a stepping stone towards freedom. A lot of reps who've been seasoned reps can have those early mornings, and yet as they get seasoned, they can then delegate, some of those late night duties maybe to their associate, and they don't have to be on call now unless you're unless you're in trauma. Okay, so however, just keep in mind that in device you will have to be in the operating room more. Okay, so it's maybe a little bit harder hours. So that just gives you a little bit of perspective And hopefully that will help you as you make this decision. So let's talk about training, the ramp period, learning curve. So pharma offers intensive structured onboarding. It's almost like you're going back to medical school. It's like you have weeks of learning the disease. You learn about the clinical trial. Devices often have like a steeper field, as far as field learning. Okay. You do have shorter formal classes. And in fact, if you're interviewing with device, you may ask like second or third interview in. If you get to know these reps, ask if you can do a ride along. Now in pharma, you would never want to ask this, okay? Now that brings us to number 8 is what about territory size, the travel, the geography? Pharma territories are usually smaller, not always. We often say that pharma territories are often smaller than device, but it's not always the case. It just depends on the division, okay? And in specialty pharma, for example, there might be like 5 reps across the state, or maybe even 1 rep across the state. It just depends on the product. But if you start out in primary care, you may be having a really small, you may have a really small territory. Number 9, we talk about the product life cycle, the innovation cadence. Sometimes pharma has this, they have these very long development timelines and periods. And maybe if it's an expansion, you have to actually wait for that FDA approval. Devices often have, new upgrades, enhancements. Maybe it's used in a new disease. And so with all these, again, it depends on the, in the division, whether it's device or pharma, and you just want to do your research so that you know what you're getting yourself into. What about career paths and advancement? Again, we talked about in pharma, you will often start out calling on primary care. You will start out as a rep. If you do well, you'll be a trainer. Then you can be a district manager. You can be like a regional leader. In device, they allow more entrepreneurial leaps. Reps who perform may gain new territories. You may want to shift. Maybe you want to shift into training as well, or marketing or leadership, where you're leading the team. Okay. And so I do think in pharma, there's probably more roles. For example, in pharma, these companies have these roles like thought leader liaison, in which you're kind of a hybrid. You're not really sales, but you're a hybrid between, say, the marketing side and also science. And you're able to gather these insights from physicians and bring it back to marketing. In pharma, there are these roles called key account managers. Okay, so they may be working with all the reps, and these specialty roles may be, discussing things like whether the drug's on formulary, and you're kind of big picture working with the hospital, maybe with pharmacists as well, maybe major programs that, the physicians are interested in. And so there are these specialty roles, field reimbursement managers, key account managers, that in pharma, it seems that you can break into these. All right, what about the risk and stability? So we've talked about this, that pharma is generally more stable. So if a product is approved, it could sell for years. Device, we talk about in device that the best of the best can often make more in device, but it is a little bit more, unpredictable in a sense. Sometimes your territory will be split, and it's very important that you understand your hiring manager and the culture. The earning potential stories and realities, like in device, you do, and we've had people come on. We had a guy come on, Justin, who talked about making $750,000, but that's not every single year, and there's more expenses, right? And pharma is a little bit more stable in the sense that you have that high base salary year after year, right? And pharma often does give better benefits, especially, some of these companies, they give things like restricted stock units. They give, you can even get a pension. but you're not going to have that same earning. Like I've never talked to a pharma rep who's made, like I said, I made $750,000. The exception is I have met guys whose company, they had stock in the company, and that smaller company was acquired. And so that's why I do know multiple people on my, in pharma, multiple people who are multimillionaires. One guy has 4 homes. Another guy, lives in his house is over $1 million. Another guy, it's probably like $2 or $3 million. There's another guy who has lots of land. He has horses. You can make good money if, once you get in, you get to know these doctors. If there's a startup and an innovative product, I do hear the stories of pharma guys having equity. And then once that company is bought out, they do well. But most of the time, it's not that. Most of the time in pharma, you'll be starting out having to prove yourself with primary care. It'll be hard. Most of the time in device, let's just face the fact, you'll start out as an associate. Starting out, you'll be making like $80K as an associate. In pharma, you'll start out with a 110 base, maybe 35 commission on top of that, maybe making 145. But you got to see this as a stepping stone. Building trust, this industry can change your life. And if you're thinking about it, the most helpful thing that you can do is get a coach, get a guide. Because you may have some ideas about what you're going to do, and it may or may not work. And that's why I want to just encourage you to consider joining Medical Sales U, because I've helped people to break into the large device companies. They've broken into the large diagnostic companies, smaller diagnostic companies. We've had people break in, you think about the pharmaceutical company, just think of that name. It's very likely that our people have broken in at that company that you're thinking about. So it's worth investing in yourself. You have to look at this as a return on investment. I just talked to Kanika minutes ago. I talked to her, and she came here new to the United States, and she broke in at a company very quickly. Contract work, making $95K. New to the United States, making $95,000 in Dallas, Texas. Then she stayed in the program, and she continued interviewing, and she just got an offer with a 120 base and $80,000 commission. That's $200,000 in specialty pharmaceutical sales. It changed her life. And you're going to hear her story. She's going to be on the podcast here this next year in 2026. We just recorded it, and we're going to release this in 2026. I think about Sydney. Sydney was on the call last night, a nurse making $68,000 as a nurse, $68,000. And then she breaks in as an oncology nurse educator. And she shared this with our team last night, making like a 110, 115 base plus a commission that brings her to like 132. We're talking about a $60,000 increase in pay, plus money for her car, gas. You think about the benefits. So gas card, company car, or allowance of like $1,000 a month. Or like you either get one, either get like the allowance for your car, or you get a company car. Okay. And then you get your 401k. You get restricted stock units often. Sometimes you get a pension. This will change your life. This industry can change your life. We've helped all types of people. Ministers. We have a music minister who just joined. We have a couple more nurses. We just mentioned we had a basketball coach get in recently. We can help you in this industry. My degrees were not perfect. I had a religion degree, philosophy, did not have a science background, and yet I broke in. But if you believe in yourself, check us out at Medical Sales U. Let me be your guide. I can help you in this process. If you're trying to break into medical device or pharmaceutical sales, or maybe you're ready to reinvent yourself into a new specialty like oncology, our program, Medical Sales U, can help.
I'm extremely grateful for Dave Starrett and his program, Medical Sales U.
I'm now making $60,000 more than I was as a pharmacist.
I highly recommend the program. I just landed an incredible dream job.
Our members come from every background: nurses, pharmacists, teachers, athletes, and they're breaking in fast, averaging $151,875 in 11 and a half weeks. Many are earning over $200K. The industry is changing lives. You can change lives. Check us out at Medical Sales U. Invest in yourself, and let's get you in the game.